Hi, I'm Lenice Brothers, a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. This is the Period Story Podcast, where in each episode, I sit down with a guest to talk about their period story. We get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods and so much more. Now, on to today's guest. On today's episode, we have Zachi Brewster. Zachi is a sex and pleasure educator, abortion and miscarriage doula, and a freelance community manager for reproductive well-being organizations. She holds space for people to trust and feel at home in their bodies, starting the conversations that matter and building communities around our shared stories. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
So let's start off with the question I always ask. So tell me the story of your first period.
I feel like as first periods go, it was pretty calm. I remember I'd had cramps for like 2 days and it was a weekend. I remember that because I was at home but I hadn't realized it was cramps. I just knew that I had this stomach pain and it wasn't going away and it was making me upset. And then I think in the middle of the night, I got up and went to the loo and there was blood. And I was like, but I was in quite like a dozy state. And so I went and woke my mum up and she was like, there's pads in the bathroom. And I put one on and I went back to bed. And that was pretty much it. It's pretty boring, but I think that as first periods go, I'd rather that than like something public or explosive.
Yeah. How old were you?
I think I was around 13, but I felt quite late because a lot of my friends had already started. My older sister had. Most of my cousins at that time were older than me, so I felt like the last one. So I was just like, please come. And then when it did, it came and it was like, okay, fine, life goes on.
And when you're in the middle of the night, when your mom said, okay, there are pads in the bathroom, how did you know how to put it on?
Because I actually tried on pads before, I think from school, but also having my older sister, my mum, my cousins, I knew more or less how they worked. So it was quite normal and like self-explanatory, I guess. And I think that I was just like, I'll deal with it in the morning. And then that's it.
And you said you deal with it in the morning. And then what did you do? Did you speak to your mum or your older sister?
So I spoke to my mum in the middle of the night. And then when I woke up, I think it maybe really hit, but it was more very practical. I think my mum was my mum's always lovely. And she was like, okay, so now you do this. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But because I also felt like now I was part of this club, I think I was pretty cool about it. I was like, no, I've got it. I know what I'm doing.
And when you went to school, because you said you were one of the last of your friends to get it, did you have a conversation with your friends about it? And if you did, how did that go?
I think I called my best friend at the time the morning or the afternoon after. But I remember feeling like pretty cool, like, okay, this means like I'm an adult now or something, which obviously it doesn't. But I think I probably had a conversation with my friends about it. But I think I played it down like, yeah, no, I've got these pads in my bag because I've got my period or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was something like that. But yeah, I was quite happy. I was really happy when it started actually.
And so did that happiness continue as you started to get more and more cycles?
I think yes and no, because I've never really had sort of problems, I guess. I think the thing that I found confusing was what you're taught in school, that it's a 28-day cycle and you bleed for like, I think we were told 3 to 5 days. So from the first day up until now, which is almost like 15 years of having a period, my period's always been 7 days long and relatively heavy and with clots. And so that was the thing that I struggled with in feeling maybe slightly abnormal or tired, like really tired during my period of like is this normal? Is it normal to bleed for this long? Is it normal to have such heavy periods? Are clots normal? So all of that wasn't a conversation. I didn't have it in that term, in that sort of, with that sort of phrasing with my friends. I just knew that many of them had really short periods, or suddenly, like from when we were 15, were on the pill, either for like contraception or to manage their periods. But so I think it was like not having the wider conversation of the variations that you can have with your periods. I think I struggled with that, because although I could talk to my mum and my sister and my friends, I think there's a lot of assumption around periods that you just deal with it and you know what you're doing. And so you don't sort of complain too much, because it's like, well, everyone else gets on with it, so I just have to get on with it. Whilst at the same time you're thinking, am I normal? Is this how it's meant to be?
So when did you learn that about what normal actually is, and what that meant for you in terms of your period?
I think I would say I'm still learning. Like, I found my normal and I was like, okay, 7 days doesn't mean that I was anemic, but it doesn't mean that I've lost like all the blood in my body. And clots happen. I used to have a lot more clots when I was younger. I don't really get them anymore. But it was sort of like after a while, and then having small conversations, or someone mentioned something here or there. And now especially that I've started tracking and sharing it on Instagram as well, I've had so many more people, like seeing the response from people like, oh yeah, I get inner thigh pain, and yeah, like my vulva aches on day 1, but I never knew that was normal. Or yeah, I never connected my anxiety to the week before my period until now. And I'm like, oh, all of these things are normal. Like, I think when we think about periods, the focus is very much on the bleed rather than the cycle. And I think if we look at the cycle, which is also, I've only been doing this for last few months. So that's why I said, I think now I'm really starting to learn, and I'm almost 28. And I'm like, well, why don't we have these conversations when you're younger, when you're a child, before your period even starts? Because it would help, I think, many people feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more trusting and a lot more able to navigate their bodies, even with healthcare professionals, in knowing what's normal and then when you need to ask for help and what you're actually asking for help for.
What made you decide to start tracking your menstrual cycle?
So I tried with apps before, but I always forget. And then I think my first day of my period is when I'm bravest. And I think I was on Instagram one day and I was like, oh, it's the first day of my period. And I talk a lot about bodies and womb happening, but I never really talked about periods. And I don't know what I was talking about. And I was like, oh, I'm feeling really bold and energetic today because it's the first day of my period. And then I suddenly thought a few people commented back and were like, me too, me too. And I was like, hey, would you be interested if I tracked it? So the first app I really used diligently to track my period was actually Instagram, which is very surprising. But a lot of the work I do has been very personal and intimate for myself. But what has helped me, and I realize one of the greatest tools of supporting each other, is making it a conversation. Yeah.
And you said that you feel really bold and brave on the first day of your period. Has it always been that way, or is it something that you've just started to realize that happens on the first day of your period?
I think I've just started to realize, also because it's not always like that every month. Sometimes it's very much like, I do not want to speak to anyone today. Do not speak to me. Do not come near me. Just give me food and I'll be fine. But I realize more and more that my energy, the more I'm aware of myself, I realize my energy drops before. And the more I listen to my body and know what works for me, actually I'm able to manage my energy levels. And so when it comes, it's like I've had this drop in energy, drop in mood. And then when it comes, it's like every month I forget, even if I know it's coming, like, oh, that's why I was like that. And then it's like, yeah, okay, now we can move forwards. And I think that that's where that energy also comes from, the sense of like, yeah, I'm starting to really enjoy my body and learning more about my body. And so when these moments come up, I embrace them a lot more. And I realize having reduced my resistance to myself, if that makes sense, makes I guess I feel more entertained and curious about myself, which makes the process slightly easier and fun.
That's an interesting phrase you use, resistance to yourself. So talk a little bit more about what that means.
I think, and I'm saying all of this from personal experience, and I having suffered from, I don't even want to use the word suffer, having experienced very heavy, very painful periods. I used to, although I was always sort of happy about my period, I did resist it coming. I was like, why am mine this long? Why, like, oh, why can't I just move it to another time? There was always some sort of friction with it. And I realized that I didn't want to be on hormonal contraception to stop them completely. There's something about feeling into my body. I knew deep down, like, I was like, I do want to feel into this. And there's something about this that I know I like happening every month. But at the same time, it was sort of dread and irritation and everything around it, from especially having heavy periods, like knowing, okay, if I'm out today, this is day 3 or day 4. So I'm going to have to be in a place where I can have a nice-ish bathroom where it's nice enough to like change myself and look after myself. And it was those small things that were really like, I don't want to have to deal with this. And so I would resist having a period and resent it and not like myself through that whole process for my moods. And I think that just adds to it. One thing I've learned, which is sort of like, sorry, there's a police car if you can hear that in the background. One thing I've learned, especially through my training as a doula and looking at birth, is, I mean, it sounds very simplistic when you say it, but the resistance that you have, it doesn't enable the process, doesn't help the process, and it actually doesn't reduce pain. If anything, it adds to mental weight and the physical load as well. So I think finding ways to work with surges or contractions when you're giving birth help the process, understanding what's actually going on at that time. And through that process helps you work with your body. And so as I was learning more in the birth world, I sort of tried to apply that to myself just through a period. And it sounds like there's a world of difference. And there is, from like birthing a baby and having a period. But if we look at it in terms of mental state and mindset, and again, I'm talking from someone with relatively manageable period symptoms. I know it's not like that for everyone, but I found, at least for me, the change in mindset helped change my experience of my cycle each month completely.
And so the work that you do as a doula and as an educator and plus tracking your cycle, has changed the way that you view your period and menstrual cycle. How has it changed the way that you speak to others in your work?
I'm very much, I think sometimes as an educator, you can learn information and then the way you put it out is like, so this is how it works. And I think I'm much more less like that and more like, actually, you have to do the work and to feel into yourself and feel what works for you. And because I realize that that's what I've had to do. And I think that that's what, if not, we go back to this old way of teaching periods, like when you're in school, of this is the cycle, this is how this works, this is how many days it's going to be, this is the type of blood you should expect on your first day, when actually it's like we would all be more empowered and more. I think the aim is not to teach knowledge, but to teach people to understand their bodies. And the only way to understand your body is to know yourself. And so I think it's less about teaching sort of an ABC and more like, so what's your language? What language does your body speak? And giving people the tools to access that for themselves. And
that's amazing. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's how I think I've grown as an educator and how I feel that I can impact and support my community and the people I work with better.